I launched my very first online course over 8 years ago, and I shot a course that was more podcast style with a few slides and a few videos. And then I shot a course that was 100 short video tutorials, including modules, editing, talking head of me, references, graphics. So in this video, I'm going to talk about those two styles and walk you through the most efficient use of your time, how you can deliver the content confidently and connect with your students on the other end, and how you can get the best of both worlds by delivering accurate information, but not coming across as a robot, getting that relatable piece into it as well. So yes, I launched my first online course 8 years ago, but there were several versions and there was a lot of trial and error. Over 15,000 paid students came into my courses. And so I'm going to give you those shortcuts, those workarounds, so you have the very best use of your time and the absolute best results out of the gate. So although I launched my first course over 8 years ago, I had 15,000 paid students come through those doors. So there were lots of different versions and I tweaked the product many times. That allowed me so much experience in knowing the most efficient use of my time when it came to shooting the content, how to be confident, and how to remember when it came to delivering some technical aspects, and also how to keep things relatable. So that's what I'm going to help you bypass, is all that trial and error, so you can start from your very best starting point today in creating or optimizing your very own online course. Okay, so we're going to dive into a couple different types of course structure. So one could be kind of more podcast style, and one could be a little bit more scripted, but I'll show you a cool way to make it hybrid so it doesn't become stiff and boring. But before we dive into those two different types, a story. About a week before I launched my first online course 8 years ago, I sat at the table, and it was my kitchen table. Progress over perfection, right? Remember that? Drill it into your head, with two contractors that were helping me with some back-end stuff with the course launch. And we sat down and one of them said, "Congratulations." And I was like,
"We haven't launched or sold anything yet."
And he said, "It doesn't matter. You came to us with this idea 3 months ago and here we are about to launch it." He said, "Do you know how many people talk about doing an online course or have an idea for an online course or say, I'm going to do an online course and never get to the launch point?" So he was congratulating me. It's a reminder that doing it imperfectly is the number one way to win and have your version of success, is to just have the courage to do it. You'll see that laced throughout some of my other videos. I'm all about moving forward imperfectly and then learning and tweaking as you go. Okay, so that's just a little reminder with whatever structure or type of course or content you're going to shoot. Just do it. There's no perfect way to do it. You'll learn as you go. You'll see what your audience responds to. That being said, the first kind of structure or style I launched was a podcast style. And really how I did it was I put together an outline, and this was stuff that I knew I could talk about off the cuff if I just had a few cues. So I put together a very simple slide structure. It was nothing fancy. I think it was mainly black and white, had my logo, and it had a few teaching images, and I put in 3 different instructional video clips. So it wasn't really heavy on video or in action stuff. We'll get to that in a minute. I had my laptop open and I just went through and taught like someone was sitting there with me. I had a little bit nicer mic than just what came with the MacBook. You could use a lab, and you could use like a Yeti like this. You want to make sure your sound quality is good and there's not a bunch of rustling or background stuff. So this was like 20 bucks on Amazon. It's not expensive, but it gave me that just little better quality to begin with. I really didn't do a lot of stopping or going back. I did a few times, but if I said something that wasn't perfect, I rolled with it and I said, "Oh, I meant this." And actually that first launch, people really loved it because it was relatable content. They felt like they were having a conversation with me. And a lot of times we think of that as like, oh, well, it's not perfect, it's not professional. Sometimes that's not what your students are looking for, right? They want clarity. They don't want you to teach in a way that's like, well, does she mean this or that? But they do want relatability. So it was very low production cost and it packed a big punch because I was using my expertise, and women who were pregnant and had no idea what's it going to be like to feed my baby. I started to lay a foundation and I put a lot of tools in their imaginary tool belt that they could start to envision what that was like. They knew that if they had this issue to do this. So we created that transformation, even though the course was not highly, technologically advanced or robust in that way. So that's one way to do it, is to have an outline, to have a little lav mic, some teaching images, graphs perhaps, and have a few video tutorials. And that could be just shooting whatever you're trying to teach, or you could use something like Loom if you're showing something on a computer screen and illustrate it that way. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about a course structure where you've got a little bit more of a script and it's a little more structured. We found out through surveys, I'm a big survey girl, if you want a video all about how to survey and understand more about your ideal customer, putting that into your messaging and getting higher conversion rates, check out this video right here. But we found through surveys that people really loved to see it on screen. They really loved seeing those real life tutorials with moms, either breastfeeding their baby or pumping or whatever it is. They wanted to see it in action and they wanted to see real moms doing it. And also through surveying, we found out that we missed a couple topics that we just didn't think about, that our customers were saying, hey, I wish there was a little bit more on this. So I started to retool the courses and I started to create a script outline that was a little bit more detailed and made sure that I didn't leave out references or very specific things that were asked about in the surveys. So I actually brought 2 or 3 of my team members in that had my same credential. So they were contractors, they were working at an hourly rate to help me build up the script because I knew it was going to be a lot more than my initial course version. So once we had the script ready to go, I was going to work with a videographer this time to come in and capture me delivering the content, but also a bunch of tutorials with real moms, which was what was requested from the surveys. So for my preparation part to deliver what was scripted, I called in my videographer and I said, okay, so should we use a teleprompter? Like, what's the best way for me to kind of deliver all this content? And he said, well, you can use a teleprompter, but those watching will know that you're using a teleprompter and it won't be as impactful. I mean, the script, like I said, ended up being 100 modules long. They were short, 90 seconds to 5 minutes, but still it was a lot of content. Me being the person that doesn't leave any leaf unturned, wanting to put my absolute best effort into this. After all, I was going to spend a little bit of money, right? My first course proving that minimal viable product was very low production cost. So I wanted to do the very best job I could. Okay. So how did I do that? How did I relay all that content, all those lines while looking directly into the camera? Here's my tips for that. So first things first, do not overestimate how much you can do in a day. So we set a guideline to do 10 to 15 modules in one day of shooting. And we said that each module, remember I told you they were like 90 seconds to 5 minutes long, we would set aside 30 minutes of time with the videographer. So that means if I had to start over, if I had any missteps, we had cushion. If it was a 90-second module, I might get done in 10, 12 minutes, but a 5-minute module might take me 45. So that's just what we learned over the process, that it's going to take about 30 minutes on average to get a module shot the way we wanted it to. So for my preparation, I was only looking at the script of those 10 modules I was going to do that next day or that next week. And I would read it silently over and over in my mind. That was the first step. Reading it over and over in my mind to kind of try to lay that scaffolding of memorization. Number 2, without looking at my notes, I would recite a paragraph at a time, because you're going to have maybe images you're going to use or other B-roll of the models that we were going to bring in that is going to help with transitions, but it can't be a transition every sentence. I wasn't so caught up on using exact words as long as it didn't change the meaning. So I would look at it, I'd look up from my notes, and I would pretend that I was teaching someone in the room, and I would recite that over and over until I felt very confident in a paragraph. All right, now step 3. Once I got down the meaning and then the inflection of my voice, and I could look up from my notes and do at least a paragraph, I'd pull up my voice memo app and I would record that module on voice memo. Then for the next several days leading up to when I was going to shoot those modules, I would listen to it with my headphones. So it was my voice, it was the content, the inflection that I wanted to come across when we were shooting. This was an absolute game changer. So remember that scaffolding I talked about with reading it? This really was the foundation of me to be able to recall, and everybody learns differently, but just listening to that audio over and over really helped the content to roll off my tongue as second nature once we were in the recording phase and the videographer was there on shoot day. Okay, so when you're going off of a script, it can come off a little bit more stiff than like the podcast style that I talked about. So in a second, I'm going to tell you how we kind of do a hybrid and mix the best of both worlds in our finished product of the course. But first, I want to talk about a little trick that my videographer showed me. Once you're actually in the middle of shooting, it's shooting day and you are going to make mistakes no matter what preparation you have. Have you ever seen like bloopers from TV sitcoms? Like, doesn't matter who you are, you're going to make those mistakes even if you're very well prepared. My videographer talked to me about how to do a redo without starting 3 paragraphs back and having to redo the entire module. If you mess up in the middle of a sentence, you don't just back up to the beginning of that sentence. You back up to the beginning of the previous sentence so that when they go through and edit, it rolls off and the inflection is more fluid than how you would change it at the start of a sentence. So let me show you an example from Life's Playbook to Success. Love this book. This is a random page. Okay, so I'm gonna read it first, okay? Take a few minutes each day and use your imagination. Picture yourself as confident, prepared. Put yourself on the physical starting line and imagine what it feels like to reach the finish. Take a few minutes each day and use your imagination. Picture yourself as confident, prepared. Put yourself on the mental starting line. Oh, wait, I'm supposed to say physical starting line there. So instead of just going physical starting line, I'd go back 2 sentences before. Picture yourself as confident and prepared. Put yourself on the physical starting line and imagine what it feels like to finish. Okay, so hopefully that illustrated to you how that delivery, when you do mess up, how you can make it more streamlined for the editing and easier to cover up with B-roll and making sure that the inflection of your voice is the same. Okay, so I recorded all these modules over a summer. It took so much time. Pro tip would be is if you can have another person there that knows the content very well and can act as kind of like your judge or your moderator, because sometimes you'll deliver a piece of content and you're doing your best to do that. Your videographer is doing their best to capture the content and you'll miss a mistake. So it's not absolutely necessary, but because ours was medically and healthcare based, I did have somebody else there that knew the content in and out. And if something came across and it didn't have the same meaning, she kind of put her hand up and say, we need to redo that and here's what we need to tweak. But regardless of what the structure or the setup is, those memorization tactics of reading aloud, teaching aloud without using your notes, recording on voice memo, and then doing it over and over again, those are going to be game changers, whether you're using a videographer or you're just shooting at home on a camera or your cell phone. The last thing here, so we finished our course modules. They were amazing. They were spectacular. And we launched this new version of the course and it did amazingly well. But because I'm such a stickler about continuing to survey the new surveys that came in from the new course content, we did get some comments that said, love the courses, love how comprehensive they are, but they felt a little scripted. Can you hurt your pride for a second? Hurt my pride, stung just a little bit, but then I said, you're right. How do we also make it feel very relatable? So we listen to the survey, right? It's one thing to take the survey and then just never read the comments or implement anything. We listened to that feedback and we said, okay, how can we bring the best of both worlds? So within our course modules, we started to a little at a time because we knew this wasn't something that was going to drastically change our revenue, but it was going to continue people having a 5-star experience. So it was important to us is that we started lacing in something we called the reality check series, where it was just audio of me talking about the topics within that module in a podcast style. So they could really feel that relatability come through. We started to ask for user-generated content from our students that wanted to film almost like a little video diary of their experience breastfeeding or their first day pumping back at work. And we started to post those and lace those in. So all of a sudden we had a hybrid of very structured and correct content that showed amazing video tutorials, but we weren't missing the relatability piece. So we had the best of both worlds. And I think that's what led to over 15,000 paid students inside the courses. My course business ended up being acquired for 7 figures. So I hope you found this video helpful. Let me know in the comments if there's one tidbit that you're gonna pull out, something that was helpful or that you learned, and if you've got a course or thinking about launching your course. See you in the next video.